Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to solve linear equations, and these equations are going to involve both the multiplication and the addition property of equality. So remember, linear equations have this form. So at some point, you can write it as ax plus b equals c. And so notice what makes it linear is that it can be transformed into this type of equation, but in particular, the variable x has an exponent of 1. Okay, so for example, let's look at this equation. So we're going to solve this equation. Suppose we had 2x minus 4 is equal to 16. So 2x minus 4 equals 16. Okay, so so notice that the process is to try and get the variable by itself. So at this point, when you read it, it's read as 2 times x, and then you're subtracting 4. And then that's going to equal 16. So you're trying to find what value of x such that when you multiply by 2 and then you subtract 4, it equals 16. Okay, so that's what you're trying to find. You're trying to find the solution. So you're trying to find what number when multiplied by 2 and then subtract 4 equals 16. Okay, so notice that this variable x is being multiplied by 2, and whatever this product is, you're subtracting 4. Okay? So the first thing you want to do when solving a linear equation is, if you recall the previous lesson, if there are any parentheses, you want to use distributive property. Okay, so there's no distributive property here. The next thing you want to do is see if you can combine like terms. On the left side, those two terms are not alike. On the right side, there's only one term, so there's nothing you can do in terms of combining like terms. Okay, now look at what you have though. So I'm multiplying x by 2, and then you're subtracting 4. Always use the addition property of equality first. Use the addition property of equality first. You're going to use the multiplication property last. Okay, so we'll repeat this. You're going to use the multiplication property last in this case. All right, so in this lesson, you're going to see how that's going to look. You use a multiplication property last. All right, so right now I'm subtracting 4. Remember, it's just like in a lesson where you just had an x here. And so to get the variable x by itself, right now you're subtracting 4. The opposite is to add 4. So same idea. So you're going to add 4 to both sides. So notice the steps, just like before. So here I'm using the addition property of equality. Addition property of equality. All right, now I'm going to combine like terms now. 2x, a negative 4 and a positive 4 is 0, equal 16 plus 4 is 20. So remember how I got to that step. So I got to that step by combining like terms. Combine like terms. All right, now look at what we have. Now, it's obvious that you can look at this and indicate what the solution is. 2 times what number is 20? Well, 2 times 10 is 20, but you got to go ahead and continue the solution process, all right, because it's not always going to be that simple. You won't be able to look and guess at the answer. Okay, so right now I'm multiplying by 2. The opposite, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. The opposite is to divide by 2. So you get the variable x by itself, you can divide by the coefficient. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. Don't forget, you got to put that 1 there. Don't just cross it out. Like over here, when you cross it out, you have to indicate what that is. So a negative 4 and a positive 4 are opposites. When you add them up, you get 0. That's why we put a 0 there. Here, when you cross this out, you got to understand what that means. That means 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 1 times x is x. And so then we get 20 divided by 2 is 10. And so this part here, what I did here was I used the multiplication property of equality. Multiplication property of equality. And then what we did next, when I did the multiplication property of equality, when I said 2 divided by 2 is 1, 20 divided by 2 is 10, I simplified. Okay, so all I did was simplify. All right, so that's your solution. So your solution is 10. All right, and you can check this if you want to. Now remember, on a test, you're not going to have time to check. So let's check this. So go back to the original problem, 2x minus 4 equals 16, and where we see the variable x, you're going to plug in 10. So the question is 2 times 10, subtract 4, equal to 16? That's a question. Well, remember the order of operations, so I'm going to multiply before I subtract, so 2 times 10 is 20, And then 20 minus 4 is 16. So it does work. All right, number 2. Okay, so number 2, let's suppose we had this. So negative x plus 2 equal 22. So negative x plus 2 equal 22. Okay, so if you look at what you have, it looks like this, like the original right here, like number 1. Again, see how this is a negative x. If there's no number there, remember it's understood to be 1. So it may help you if you put a 1 there. So I'm going to write this as negative 1x plus 2 equal 22. So all I did was just rewrite this so I can see that actual number here, that actual coefficient. Okay, so the first thing you always do is use the addition property. Well, first of all, look to see if there are any parentheses. There are no parentheses. Now we're going to do some with parentheses, but in this case there aren't any. So if there were, you would use a distributive property. Then if you can combine like terms, you can combine like terms. We don't have any. And so now I'm going to use the addition property of equality next. So right now I'm adding 2. The opposite of adding 2 is to subtract 2. So remember, that's the addition property of equality. Addition property of equality, that's what I used. All right, now I'm going to combine like terms. Remember all the process we went through, how they alternate. So combine like terms. So I get a negative 1x, or just negative x, but let's just leave it as negative 1x for right now. A positive 2 and a negative 2 is 0, equal, and then 22 minus 2 is 20. All right, so what I did here was combine like terms. That's how I got this. So I got this equation by combining like terms. All right, now here's where we at. Okay, so now remember we're trying to get x by itself. So the reason why you want to leave it as negative 1x was so that you can see that I have the variable x and I'm multiplying it by the coefficient negative 1. All right, so since I'm multiplying by negative 1, the opposite is to divide by negative 1. So divide both sides by negative 1. So remember, what you do to one side, you have to do the other. So that's the multiplication property of equality. That's what I'm using. Multiplication property of equality. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 20 divided by negative 1, and 1 times x is x. And then 20 divided by negative 1 is a negative 20. So there's your solution. And remember, to go from here to here, all I did was simplify. That's all I did. All right, so there's your solution. And it kind of makes sense because remember what another way that we talked about this? This negative x means the opposite of x. The opposite of x. So if x is your solution, and we're saying the solution is negative 20, what is the opposite of negative 20? Well, the opposite of negative 20 is 20. And 20 plus 2 is 22. Okay? All right, number 3. Okay, so number 3, let's suppose we had this. We had x divided by 3 minus 2 equal negative 5. So x divided by 3, subtract 2 equals negative 5. All right, so remember we talked about this idea that I'm about to mention. So when we had x divided by 3, you want to rewrite this where you can actually see the coefficient of x. Okay? Now there's another way you're going to do this in a later section, but let's just keep it consistent for right now. So x divided by 3, remember, is the same thing as saying 1/3 x. So remember that number right here in front of x is 1, but the coefficient is not 1. The coefficient is 1/3. That's what this is. All right, so 1/3 x minus 2 equal negative 5. All right, so it's always a good idea to rewrite it like this. Okay, so notice there are no parentheses. I can't combine any like terms right away. So now I'm going to go to the addition property of equality. So right now I'm subtracting 2. The opposite is to add 2. So do the addition property of equality first. Do the multiplication property last. Addition property of equality. Okay, so 1/3 x, I'm combining like terms now, negative 2 and a positive 2 is 0, is equal to, and a negative 5 plus 2 is a negative 3. So remember, all I did here was combine like terms. So that's how I got to this step. Combine like terms. All right. Now remember what we did next. So remember, to get the variable x by itself, we did one of two things. You could have either divided both sides by 1/3, or you could have just multiplied both sides by the reciprocal of the coefficient. All right. So in other words, you're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of the coefficient of x. So the reciprocal coefficient of x, in this case 1/3, the reciprocal is 3/1. But what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay, so I'm using a multiplication property of equality. All right, and remember we talked about whenever you multiply two numbers that are reciprocals of each other, 1/3 and 3/1, their product is 1. 3 times 1 is 3, 1 times 3 is 3, 3/3 is 1, and 1 times x is x. And here I get -3 times a +3, which is a -9. All right, and let's check this. Let's just check this for a moment. Oh, and by the way, so to go from here to here, you just simplify. All right, but let's check. So here's the original. This is the original. I'm not going to check all of them, but I'll check some of them. So there's the original, and we're saying that my solution, x, is -9. So the question is -9 divided by 3, subtract 2, the same thing as -5? That's the question. Well, a -9 divided by 3 is a -3, and a -3 and a -2 is a -5. All right, so that was number 3. Number 4, all right, let's look at number 4. Suppose in number 4 we had this. Suppose we had 6z minus 8 minus z plus 3 equals 0. So 6z minus 8 minus z plus 3 equal 0. Okay, so notice that there are no parentheses, so I'm not going to use the distributive property first, but I can combine like terms. So notice in the 3 problems we just did, the first thing I did right away was use the addition property of equality. So notice in all the problems, that's the first thing I did, addition property of equality. Addition property of equality. And I want you to notice that you see the equations, the linear equations, that original was of this form. 2 times x minus 4 equal some constant. Okay? They all look like that. All right, so 1/3 x minus 2 equal -4. They were that form, ax plus b equals c. Okay? Over here, though, it's not quite like that. So what you want to do is see if you can combine like terms. All right, so and I can, because 6z minus z is 5z. And then a -8 and a +3. Again, if you can't remember your sign numbers rules, the rules for sign numbers, use your calculator. But a -8 and a +3 is a -5. So I get 5z minus 5 equal 0. Okay, so that's where I'm at. And now it's of that form. ax plus b equals c. All right, so see, those are linear equations. Okay, so the first thing you want to do now, or the next thing you want to do, remember what I did to go from here to here is combine like terms. That's what I did. Okay, now what you want to do next is use the addition property of equality. So right now I'm subtracting 5. The opposite is to add 5 to both sides. Notice, just like we talked about before in previous lessons, do one thing at a time when you use the addition property of equality. Okay, so that's the addition property of equality. All right, now when you use the addition property of equality, remember the next thing you're going to do is combine like terms. So I get 5z. A -5 and a +5 is 0. They're opposite, so when you add them up, you get 0. So 5z and then 0 is 5z equal, and then 0 plus 5 is 5. All right, so that's combined like terms. That's how I got to this step. And notice the only thing left is to get z by itself. So right now, I'm multiplying by 5. So remember the coefficient is 5. So since I'm multiplying by 5, the next step is to divide both sides by 5. So that's the multiplication property of equality. Multiplication property of equality. All right, and now we're going to simplify. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times z is z. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So there's your solution. So you go from here to here, we just simplify. Okay, so your solution is 1. And again, you can check. So here's the original. I'm just going to rewrite it as 6z minus 8 minus z plus 3. And you want to see if that's going to equal 0. All right, so z is 1. So I'm saying z times 1 minus 8 minus 1, because that's z, plus 3. I want to see if that's going to equal 0. Well, 6 times 1 is 6. Okay? 6 subtract 8 is a negative 2. A negative 2 subtract 1 is a negative 3. And a negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And that's what you wanted. All right. Number 5. Okay, so number 5, let's suppose we had this. Suppose we had 2/3 y minus 11 equal negative 9. So 2/3 y minus 11 equal negative 9. All right. So notice right away it's of that linear equation form. Ax plus b equals c. So ax plus b equals c. And there are no parentheses, so I'm not going to use the distributive property. I can't combine any like terms right away. So now I'm going to go to the addition property of equality. So right now I'm subtracting 11 from this term right here that contains a variable. So the opposite of subtracting 11 is to add 11. So I'm going to add 11 to both sides. Notice how it looks. Add 11, add 11. And notice I'm combining like terms. So I'm putting all my constants under each other. So that's the addition property of equality. So now I'm going to combine like terms. Remember, once you do the addition property of equality, the next step is combine like terms. So 2/3 y, a negative 11 and a positive 11 is 0, equal negative 9 plus 11 is 2. All right, now the next step is to get y by itself. Now, in a previous problem, I want to show you what we did. In a previous problem, what we did, see this right here, was we multiplied both sides by the reciprocal of the coefficient. So the reciprocal 1/3 is 3 over 1, and that's what you saw here. We multiply both sides by 3 over 1. So you can do the same thing here, but I want to remind you about the other way now. So the other way was this. So we'll go ahead and rewrite this over. So the other way was to divide both sides by the coefficient. Looks like this. So that was in a previous lesson. So remember, we did it both ways. So this is the multiplication. The multiplication property of equality. All right, and don't forget what we did here to go from here to here was we combined like terms. So that's how we got this step: combine like terms. Okay, now 2/3 divided by 2/3 is 1. 1 times y is y. Okay, so that should make sense. All right, now you see this right here. So we got to remember something from a previous course or whatever we reviewed in a previous lesson, same idea. So you're going to say 2, this numerator is 2, so that's 2 over 1. So remember division, when you divide fractions, you're going to change the multiplication problem. So 2 over 1 times the reciprocal of 3/2. The reciprocal of 2/3. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. And then I'm going to reduce. 2 into 2 is 1, 2 into 2 is 1, so I get y is 3. So there's your solution. Y is 3. And you can check this. So if you check, go back to the original. My original was 2/3 y minus 11 equal 9, negative 9. All right, so let's see if when I substitute 3 for y, if I get that. So 2/3 times y is 3 over 1. Whatever that is, I'm going to subtract 11, and the question is that equal to a negative 9? That's your question. Well, if you look at this right here, 3 into 3 is 1, 3 into 3 is 1, and that's just 2 now. 2 times 1 is 2. And the question is, what is 2 minus 11? Well, 2 minus 11 is a negative 9, and that's what you wanted. So it does check out. All right, so that's number 5. Okay, number 6. I'm going to do 6 on this page. Okay, so number 6, we have this. We have 3/4 t minus a half and equal 1/3. So 3/4 t minus a half equals 1/3. Okay, so we're dealing with fractions, but let's just be consistent. Let's just continue doing it the way we're doing it. In another lesson, you're going to learn something else about what you can do when you have fractions. All right, but for right now, let's just keep it like this, because it's very simple to do what we're doing. So that's just ax plus b equals c. So that's what this looks like. A times x plus b equals c, although the variable is t. So there are no parentheses, so I'm not going to use distributive property. We can't combine like terms right away, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the addition property of equality. So right now I'm subtracting a half, so the opposite is to add a half. So I'm going to add 1/2 to both sides. Okay, so that's the addition property of equality. Okay, now I'm going to combine like terms. I get 3/4 t, a negative 1/2 and a positive 1/2 is 0, equal. All right, so let's look at this. So you have 1/3 plus 1/2. That's what this is, 1/3 plus 1/2. Use your calculator. Make it quick. So 1/3 plus 1/2. All right, and you get this. All right, so you're going to change that to a fraction. So remember, you're going to go second PRB. So you see fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction, and press equal, and there's your, and that is 1/3 plus 1/2 is 5/6. All right, 5/6. All right, but I want you to remember, you really need to know how to do this without using a calculator as well. So the LCD is 6 because it's the smallest number that 3 and 2 will go into evenly. So LCD is 6. And so you're going to write equivalent fractions. 3 times 2 is 6, but what you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. 2 times 1 is 2. So 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. Kind of makes sense because if you reduce 2/6, you get 1/3 back. Divide both sides by 2. Divide numerator and denominator by 2. Over here, that's a 2. So I'm going to multiply by 3 because 2 times 3 is 6. But what I do to the numerator, denominator, I have to do to the numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. And now since the denominators are the same, I just add their numerators. 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay? All right, so I get 5/6 here. All right, so now you're going to get the variable t by itself. So remember, there are two ways to do this. You could divide both sides by 3/4, the coefficient, or the other way is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Okay, because remember, you want a 1 here. That's what you want. You want this to be a 1t, not 3/4 t. So we'll go ahead and rewrite this. And so basically you're saying this. You're going to say, well, to get this right here to be a 1, to get this to be a 1, I've got to multiply this fraction. I've got to multiply by its reciprocal. That's how I'm going to get a 1. So 3/4 times 4/3 will be a 1 because 4 times 3 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12, 12 divided by 12 is 1. But what I do to the left side, I have to do to the right side. So I've got to multiply that by 4/3 as well. All right, and so we now get this. Let's go ahead and reduce first. You didn't have to. You could have said, by the way, 1 times t is t. Let me go ahead and just kind of write this here, this side right here. That's 5/6 times 4/3. If you didn't reduce first, you'd have to multiply first. So 5 times 4 is 20. 6 times 3 is 18, and then reduce. So they're both divisible by 2. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So you get 10 9ths. You could have also reduced first. See this 4 and this 6? I can reduce that. They're both divisible by 2. 2 into 4 is 2. 2 into 6 is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 3 is 9, which is the same thing we got here. So I get t to be 10 9ths. Okay, so there's your solution. Okay, now let's look at this. Okay, this is going to be number 7. Okay, number 7, suppose we had 11x. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Suppose we had 8x plus 20 equal 6x plus 18. So 8x plus 20 equals 6x plus 18. So now that kind of looks like some equation we had in the previous lesson. Remember, we have variables on both sides, constants on both sides. There are no parentheses, so I'm not going to use distributive property. I cannot combine like terms yet because those terms on the left and those terms on the right are not like terms. But remember, you have variables on both sides, so you want to bring the variables to the same side. Okay? Now, in a previous lesson, remember in the lesson where we tended to bring the variables to the side where the coefficient is larger, it does not matter now because you now know something about the multiplication property of equality. So it does not matter. Okay? So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm just going to bring the variables to the right side. And that's going to help you when we get into inequalities. So when you get to inequalities, it is a good idea to bring the variables to the left side. You don't have to. We'll do it both ways, but you'll see how sometimes it's more manageable if the variables on the left when we talk about inequalities. But in equations, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to bring them to the left. So I want to bring I got to get rid of the 6x. So in order to do that, adding 6x is not going to help me because 6x plus 6x is 12x. I want to get rid of this. I want to add its opposite to it. So the opposite of 6x is a negative 6x. I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. And so notice you were aligning our like terms. So remember what I did here was use the addition property of equality. Now remember, whenever I use addition property of equality, the next step is to combine like terms. So 8x minus 6x is 2x plus 20 equal 6x minus 6x is 0. 0 plus 18 is 18. And now notice that this looks like this. Okay? So now I'm going to use the, and by the way, to go from here to here, we combine like terms. Okay, so now I've got to get x by itself, but right now I'm multiplying by 2 and then I'm adding 20. So always use the addition property first. Use the multiplication property last. So right now I'm adding 20. The opposite of adding 20 is to subtract 20. So I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. Okay, so again, that's the addition property of equality. Okay, now once I use the addition property of equality, remember the next thing you're going to do is combine like terms. Combine like terms. So 2x, 20 and a negative 20 is 0, equal 18 and negative 20 is a negative 2. Okay, negative 2. All right, so we'll go ahead and rewrite this over. Okay, so now I'm going to get x by itself. So right now I'm multiplying by 2. The opposite is 2. Divide by 2. So we divide both sides by 2. So that's a multiplication property of equality. Always do that last. So use that property last. And now we're going to simplify. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times x is x. Negative 2 divided by 2 is a negative 1. So there's your solution. So remember what we did here to go from here to here was we simplified. All right. Now again, let's just check this one. So go back to the original. My original equation was 8x plus 20 equal 6x plus 18. So I'm just checking to make sure that negative 1 is actually the solution. So wherever I see the variable x, and I see it both places, both sides, so wherever I see the variable x, I'm going to substitute negative 1. So I get 8 times negative 1 plus 20, and I want to see if that's going to equal 6 times x, and x is negative 1, plus 18. Okay, using the order of operations, 8 times a negative 1 is a negative 8. Negative 8 plus 20, that is a positive 12. Over here, 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 18 is also positive 12. So what that means is that negative 1 is a solution. Number 8. Okay, so number 8, suppose we had, suppose we had this. Suppose we had 3 times 2x plus 5 equals negative 18 plus 9. So 3 times 2x plus 5 equals negative 18 plus 9. Okay, so listen carefully to this. So you see I do have parentheses here. So the first thing you want to do, first step, when you have parentheses, is to get rid of the parentheses. So you're going to use distributive property first. Okay, do one thing at a time. Use a distributive property first. So 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times 5, a positive 5, is 15. All right, the other side over. Okay, so all I did to go from here to here was use distributive property. That's all I used. Okay, so next thing, once you use distributive property, the next thing is to combine like terms. So on the left side, I can't combine any terms here, but on the right side, I could, because these are constants. So I get 6x plus 15 equal, and negative 18 plus 9 is a negative 9. And notice this now looks like ax plus b equals c. See, ax plus b equals c. All right, so now the next step, I remember what we did here to go from here to here was we combine like terms. Okay, so now the next step is we're going to get x by itself, so right now I'm multiplying by 6, and then I'm adding 15. So you're going to do the addition property first. So the addition property is, since I'm adding 15, the opposite is to subtract 15. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. So what I do to one side, I have to do the other. So subtracting 15, I'm allowed to do that because of the addition property of equality. That's why. So remember, once you do the addition property of equality, the next step is to always combine like terms. So negative 15 and a positive 15 is 0. 6x plus 0 is 6x. A negative 9 and a negative 15 is a negative 24. Okay, so that was combined like terms. And now I only have one thing left to do. So I got to get x by itself. So right now I'm multiplying by 6. The coefficient is 6. So the next step is to divide both sides by 6. Let's go ahead and rewrite this over. So I'm going to say divide by 6, divide by 6. Remember, that's the multiplication property of equality. So that's what allows me to divide both sides by 6. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify it. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 1 times x is x. Negative 24 divided by 6 is a negative 4. So there's your solution. And again, if you want to check, so remember this was simplified. So if you want to check, go back to the original problem. 3 times 2x plus 5 equal negative 18 plus 9. That was the original. So where we see the variable x, I'm going to substitute negative 4. I only see it right here. So this becomes 3 times 2 times x is a negative 4, plus 5. And I want to see that's equal to negative 18 plus 9. Okay, so on the left side, remember the order of operations. So I do parentheses first. 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. Okay, and then negative 8 plus 5 is a negative 3. So I get 3 times negative 3. And 3 times negative 3 is a negative 9. And over here, negative 18 plus 9 is a negative 9, and so notice they're equal to each other. So negative 4 is your solution. Okay, number 9. Okay, so number 9, let's suppose we had this. Suppose we had, let's see. All right, suppose we had negative 6y minus 3 equal negative 5y minus 7. So negative 6y minus 3 equals negative 5y minus 7. So notice there are no parentheses, so I'm not going to use distributive property. I can't combine like terms yet because these terms are not alike, these terms are not alike. So notice there are variables on both sides, constants on both sides. So let's deal with the variables first. And again, it does not matter which side you bring the variables on, because we now know something about the multiplication property of equality, so it does not matter. So I'm going to bring the variables to the left. So I got to get rid of this negative 5y. So to get rid of this negative 5y, I'm going to do the opposite. The opposite of negative 5y is a positive 5y. So I'm going to add 5y to both sides. So that's how it looks. Okay, so that's the addition property of equality. So that's what I just used. All right. Now the next step is to combine like terms. Once you use this, you got to combine like terms. Negative 6 and a positive 5 is a negative 1. So this right here, when I combine these y's, that's a negative y, which is really a negative 1. Okay, so negative y. Negative 1y. Minus 3 equal, when I combine these two, that's 0. And 0 to negative 7 is a negative 7. Not 7, negative 7. All right, so now I'm going to... okay, so remember what we did here. To get this step, we combine like terms. All right, so remember the whole idea is to isolate this variable, but I got to get rid of the subtract 3. So the opposite of subtract 3 is to add 3. So I'm still using I'm still using the addition property of equality. Always use the multiplication property last. Then, once you use the addition property of equality, the next step is to combine like terms. Combine like terms. So negative 3 and a positive 3 is 0. A negative y and 0 is a negative y, equal negative 7 plus 3 is a negative 4. Okay? So that's combined like terms. All right, now I want you to notice, see this y? I got to get y by itself. It's a negative y right now. But remember, negative y means the same thing as saying negative 1 times y. So it may help if you write it like this first. Okay? And so now I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient of y. So the coefficient of y is negative 1. I'm divide both sides by negative 1. So that's the multiplication property of equality. Multiplication property of equality. And then I'm going to simplify reduce. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 1 times y is y. Negative 4 divided by negative 1 is a positive 4. All right, so that I'll go from here to here. I just simplified. And so there's your solution. Okay, number 10. All right, number 10. All right, number 10, suppose we had this. Suppose we had 1/2 times 2x minus 1 equals negative 1/7 minus 3/7. So 1/2 times 2x minus 1 equals negative 1/7 minus 3/7. Okay, so notice I have parentheses. I just have it on the left side, so I'm using distributive property first off. Okay, so 1/2 times 2x, remember 1/2 times 2. So remember 1/2 times 2, 2 is 2 over 1, is 1, because that's 2 over 2, which is 1. So 1/2 times 2x then is just x. Okay, 1/2 times a negative 1 is a negative 1/2. So this right here, when I use distributive property, gives us x minus 1/2. And so that's going to equal negative 1/7 minus 3/7. All right, so to go from here to here, I use a distributive property. That's all I used. Okay, so now, remember, once you use distributive property, then you want to see if you can combine like terms, just like we did here. Remember, in this example, distributive property, then we combine like terms. To go from here to here, we combine like terms. And I could, because negative 1/7 and a negative 3/7. And notice the denominators are the same, so it makes it a lot easier. So a negative 1 and a negative 3 is a negative 4. So I get x minus 1/2 equals negative 4/7. So that's what you get. And then, so what we did here to go from here to here was we combined like terms. Okay, I want you to notice, so see this variable, that's just x. So we're almost done. So the next step is to, right now I'm subtracting 1/2, the next step is to add 1/2 to both sides. So that's the addition property of equality. Addition property of equality. And then we can combine like terms. Combine like terms. All right, so negative 1/2 plus 1/2 is 0. X plus 0 is x, equal. And use your calculator with this. So we're going to say negative 1/7, negative 4/7 rather, plus 1/2. So negative 4 divided by 7. So negative 4 divided by 7 plus 1/2. So plus 1 divided by 2 equal, and I get this decimal. So let's convert this back to a fraction. And oops, okay, I'm going to do this again. So I get negative 1/14. All right, so that's negative 1/14. So there's your solution, negative 1/14. All right, let's look at one more. Let's do one with a decimal in it. So there's going to be number 11. Number 11. All right, so let's suppose we had negative 10z minus 0.5 equals negative 20z plus 1.6. All right, so notice there are no parentheses, so I don't use distributive property. I can't combine like terms right away because these terms are not alike and these terms are not alike. So do notice, though, I do have variables on both sides, constants the other side. And since we now know something about the multiplication property of equality, it does not matter which side I bring this on. So which side I bring the variables on. So let's just go ahead and bring the variables to the left side. So right now, see how this coefficient is a negative 20? So I'm going to do the opposite. So the opposite is to add 20z to both sides. Okay, 20z. So that's the addition property of equality. So that's what I'm using. Addition property of equality. Then once you use the addition property of equality, the next step is combine like terms. So negative 10z and a positive 20z is 10z minus 0.5 equal, combine like terms here, that's 0 because they're opposites. So when I add opposites, I get 0. 0 plus 1.6 is 1.6. All right. And so now remember, see how this right here looks like this, ax plus b equals c. So what you want to do now is get rid of this constant right here. So I'm subtracting 0.5. The opposite is to add 0.5 to both sides. All right, so remember to get to this point here, we combine like terms. That's what we did. So whenever you do the addition property of equality, the next step is always to combine like terms. All right, so now since I'm adding 0.5, what allows me to add 0.5 to both sides is the addition property of equality. Now remember, once you use the addition property of equality, the next step is to combine like terms. Combine like terms. And so 10z, negative 0.5 plus 0.5 is 0. So 10z plus 0 is 10z equal 1.6 plus 0.5 is 2.1. So 2 and 1/10. All right, so that's combined like terms. So that's how I got this. All right, so here's where we're at now. Okay, so I've got to get z by itself. So right now I'm multiplying z by 10. So the coefficient of z is 10. So remember, the opposite of multiplying by 10 is to divide both sides by 10, just like this. Okay, so that's a multiplication property of equality. Always use the multiplication property of equality last. Okay, multiplication property of equality last. All right, so then we're going to simplify. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 1 times z is z equal, and then using your calculator, when you do 2.1 divided by 10, now in a previous course you learned about dividing by 10, how that moves a decimal point. So dividing by 10 moves the decimal point one place to the left. If you divide by 100, you move the decimal point 2 places to the left. But if you did not remember that, you'd say 2.1 divided by 10 equals 0.21. So z equals 0.21, so 21 hundredths. So there's your solution. So remember, to get to that point, though, from here to here, we simplify. All right, so that should take care of this part of the lesson on solving linear equations. Now, the next lesson we're gonna do some more solving linear equations, but it'll be, so this will be part 3. The next one we'll look at, this was part 2. So the next one will be this very similar, but it will be a mixture of equations. All right, so that will take care of this lesson.